everyone. Welcome to the Sports Science Dudes, founded by Dr. Jose Antonio, and I am his co-host, but Dr. A is not here today. He is away on business, so I will be sitting in for him, along with my co-host, Cassie Evans. Cassie and I have been doing a lot of work together, as she has with Dr. Antonio in research, and over at NSU as well. Just so you know, she does have her MS. That's nutrition and dietetics, or is that sport and dietetics?
So my master's is in nutrition, but I have a specialty or like a concentration in sports nutrition, but also did the dietetic route at the same time because, why not? Why
not? Got to get it. And she is RD. She is certified through the CISSN. And by the way, she is doing her PhD now, which is outstanding, and working that is in human performance, correct?
Yes, human and sport performance, and my area of research is going to be eating behavior and the obesity gene. So lots of
all right, interesting, Cass. Okay, so we're gonna, by the way, you have a message for us regarding Cassie. Before we start, everyone, we want to make sure that we see all of you in June, this coming June.
Yes, it's really special too, because it's the 20th annual conference for the CISSN conference here in sunny South Florida, specifically Fort Lauderdale, which I personally think has the best beaches ever. But make sure you mark your calendars, June 15th through 17th, Fort Lauderdale, 20th annual CISSN conference. It's going to be a lot of fun. As someone that has been to other conferences besides CISSN, this is my personal favorite just because it's kind of just fun and laid back and just a bunch of science nerds that like to have fun and get some sun at the same time.
Exactly. It's a beautiful blend of learning and good people and a good time. We have special guests today, and that is Dr. Katie Dabrowski. I am excited about this because while Dr. Katie can cover a host of subject matters, I think the one today that we're going to discuss is really, really interesting. Now, I'm telling you, everybody, I am going to read her bio verbatim because I didn't memorize it. It's long, but it needs to be addressed so we can get a good overview of Katie's background, okay? So let us know this. Dr. Katie Dabrowski is a physical therapist, a doctor of physical therapy, also a certified strength and conditioning specialist. And along with being a DPT, Katie is the co-founder of Old Bull Athletics. Now, that is a facility of private practice in Miami. And I believe you guys do strength conditioning. We'll talk about that, but everything there, right? Well, as well as some rehab. So yeah, they specialize in the blending of strength, performance, rehabilitation, and through a lens of treating movement as medicine. Okay, and I think we know, and the research has validated to this day and to the extent that we can't be optimal in human performance, if you will, or even in our mindset without movement, everybody. I wish it wasn't the rule, but we're designed to move. Addition, Dr. Dabrowski is also, she's adjunct professor at Nova Southeastern with us in the Department of Psychology, Neuroscience. She earned her bachelor's in psychology and behavioral neuroscience at NSU. Great combination, by the way. And a member of the women's D2 rowing team, right? You a crew?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, everybody, when you go to her Instagram page, you're going to see she's kind of like a real Lara Croft. This woman is in shape. She's the real deal.
Definitely. I would concur.
Yes, great abs too. You'll see that. Katie earned her doctorate, by the way, of physical therapy from the University of Miami. So she's a Cane, and she was a graduate assistant and studied the impacts of exercise and neuroplasticity using TMS, which is transcranial magnetic stimulation paradigms. Really neat. Her clinical approach as a physical therapist focuses on human-centric approach with an emphasis on pain neuroscience. Everyone, well, Katie can discuss a broad range of topics. That's what we're going to look at today, not exclusively, but the pain neuroscience. But beyond that, she does a lot of strength and conditioning work, works on building resiliency within her athletes, her patients, her clientele, and really puts a lot of work into dispelling myths about injury, pain and injury, actually, if we want to look at both of those. So she blends love of neuroscience and exercise in order to optimize recovery and performance for her patients. And everyone, I can tell you that in a second, I'd put my physical health, mental too, probably, in her hands and in her trust. She is really, really good at what she does. So Katie, we're welcoming you today.
Thank you so much. And for the mental stuff, that's out of my pay grade. I'm going to refer out to my exceptional network of psychologists, but I appreciate the thought.
Yeah, well, you have a little background, right, in Psy and neurosci, so at least you can blend some of it. And I think it's impossible to separate the two. So in order to get adherence or participation, at some given point, we're coaching people mentally as well, right?
Absolutely.
You as like a physical therapist, sometimes you're just holding space for people because you're in a very like intimate relationship if you're helping them move and helping them rehab and get better. So like it's just natural to kind of have some sort of, I guess, rapport or client building between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's probably my favorite part of the job. I mean, if you think about what pain is, it's arguably the most vulnerable experience somebody could have, and they're trusting me to be there with them for it. So that's what I love about it. Like, it absolutely is kind of a perfect blend of the psychology side of things, and then also, of course, the biology of pain and healing. And how do we blend those two together, and how do we get people to get to do what they love again? It's a really emotional process, as well as being physical. So totally.
Yeah, and I love your attitude toward it, because you've explained over and over again how you're going to get people fixed. You're going to keep them moving within the confines of their injuries, right? And you will get them moving again. I know you don't concede to any injury, which is one aspect that I love about your approach. And Katie, you described too, and that's a really good way to look at it, because I never have, people entrusting you with pain, and entrusting you to alleviate it, perhaps get them back to a normal lifestyle. It's very complicated. Obviously, we can't put it in terms of it, one or two sentences, but I know you spend so much time in the neuroscience of pain. So can you give us maybe a physiological, like, what is an overview? What is going on in the body with pain? Because I know you don't accept some of the common notions or the more simplistic definitions of exactly what pain is. So maybe you can help us out on how you see it.
Yeah, this is kind of a perfect way to introduce exactly the issue with understanding pain. I kind of like to compare between the traditional biomedical model of pain, which is very much almost like the reflex arc that's happening, where you touch something hot, the sensation is sent to your brain to perceive it as pain. You have a response of being startled. That is a very, very simple, in neuroscience, like the most simple type of sensation response motor activity, like reflex arc that we have. It's very, very simple, kind of low level stuff. And for a long time, and honestly still now, that's been like the main idea of what pain is. It's basically just this really simple biological only model of if this, then this. And if we know anything about human beings, there's nothing only biomedical about human beings. And we do our patients such a disservice if we treat them as like a textbook reflex arc. Like, there's so much more than that. So that's what pain is defined as from a neurological perspective. But if we consider how vastly complex human beings are, we get an entirely different answer to that question. And I could talk forever about it, but essentially, pain is extremely complex, and it's inextricably linked with our past experiences, our expectations of what's going to happen, the myths and the bad stuff we've been told from other medical providers or anybody else in our lives, the fear around doing something that might exacerbate pain, the fear around thinking that all pain equals tissue damage, or the amount of pain is related to the amount of tissue damage. It's related to, of course, our genes. It's related to, of course, anything going on chemically, biochemically. It's really, really complex. So instead of it being this simple reflex arc, it's actually this whole cascade of events of anticipation, the expectation of what's going to happen, and our brain trying to process that. our brain, and you can consider our nervous system as like a predictive processing kind of, I don't like to say machine, but it predictively processes what the outcome it thinks is going to happen based on prior experiences. So if for a long time you've been told that deadlifting is bad for you, or if you round your back, you're going to die, or going downstairs and bringing your knees over toes, your patella is going to explode. If you've been told that for a long time, that is going to really, really intermix with your pain experience. So it's super complicated. It's different for everybody, but by understanding how complicated it is, we can do a better job of coaching people through pain.
Does the
Go on, Cass.
does the subjectivity of pain, like exactly what you said, everyone's experience is like very unique or personal to them. Does that ever make it like challenging when you're trying to explain pain to your clients or trying to treat one?
Yeah, so this is where you kind of have to read the room and see how much of an explanation of pain a patient wants. I could go on a tirade of pain neuroscience and have somebody look at me like they just do not care at all. So it's all about, and somebody who's vulnerable and in pain, the last thing I want them to think is that I'm telling them it's all in their head, because that's not what I'm saying either. What I'm saying more is it's complicated, and we have to consider just all the other things that happen in your life that can contribute to your pain experience. So it is hard because it's totally subjective, but the best thing we can do is to try to create a positive experience with movement to negate the bad stuff they've been taught before, and try to reframe things. So no matter, of course, pain being subjective, but no matter what their experience with pain is, their takeaway can be that, okay, I now understand that pain does not always equal harm, or pain does not always equal tissue damage. That's probably one of the most important things I can try to teach somebody. That one of the phrases I often tell my patients is that, you know, in the absence of trauma or red flags, it's very rare that pain has a very specific, like, tissue type of biological reason for it occurring. It's much more likely that it's this interplay of things going on. It's much more likely in an orthopedic setting, for example, that the pain that pops up without there being trauma, without you getting hit by a truck, without there being an accident, it's much more likely that it's from lack of preparedness for whatever you just made your body do, or lack of exposure to an intensity that you weren't yet ready for, or you decided you're going to run a marathon, and your first training day you run 12 miles and your ankles and your knees and your hips are like, excuse me.
Right.
It's about thus not being prepared for what you're trying to get your body to do. But then I reframe that and say, how cool is that? Because that means we just have to prepare you a little bit better, and then you'll be more resilient, and you can do all that stuff in a more logical, progressive, it's progressive overload in a logical, progressive overload type way.
This is fascinating. And you joke, okay, that, oh, the mental side of it is, that's not your game, but it is. I mean, you just gave us a host of things that we need to consider in pain science that very few people would ever address. I mean, experience, background, the fear, the anxiety over it, exacerbating it, and if not even exacerbating it, maybe to some extent creating it. This may sound crazy, but let me ask you. So, I blew out my ankle several times when I was young, right? And it rolls all the time, and I come down real hard. But, I've done it many times, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but depending upon the immediate response, I think the inflammation is contingent upon that. Now, what I mean by that is when I first did it first few times, obviously I panicked, I was scared, I was completely frightened, and my ankle was the size of my thigh come 2 days later. Now, few deep breaths, just relax. Okay, maybe light massage to the area, just don't panic. And I could be crazy, but it does seem that part of the reaction, to your point, is contingent upon my reaction to the injury, both immediately and long-term. To an extent, is that kind of what we're saying, or?
Yeah, I mean, you just basically described a huge goal that I try to get with a lot of my patients to understand is the autonomic nervous system interplay of pain and injury, and that sympathetic response of pain and injury, which is freaking out, holding our breath, increased muscle tension, hypervigilance, fear avoidance, all of which further perpetuate the cycle of the sympathetic response. Because if we
Right.
hold our breath, our brain thinks we're dying. So we're going to keep freaking out.
Exactly.
So it just adds to all of that. And then what you said, take a couple breaths, don't freak out, do some light massage. What I would also include is move within your tolerance and range
Okay.
of allowance. That's getting more parasympathetic. That's calming down that stress.
Right.
So all of that absolutely goes into play with the outcome of our level of pain, level of inflammation, all of that. Absolutely. So that interplay of the autonomic nervous system and how we react to pain and injury is super important. And this is where it gets tricky. And I'm always careful to tell people, like, I'm not here to downplay your pain experience and to tell you, just breathe, everything's going to be fine. Like, it's not that simple. But if we can help people understand their body and their nervous system a little bit in ways that are digestible. It's not necessarily have to be a neuroscience lecture, but it's really easy to explain to people how our body reacts to being freaked out and why it can be problematic. And especially if it becomes chronic, and that's a whole other conversation for what the hypotheses are for what chronic pain becomes.
Okay.
But how we can mitigate that and get a little bit more into that parasympathetic zone. One of the hardest parts, and you guys are athletes and you guys move and exercise a ton, so I know you've dealt with injuries and pain. I would argue the worst part about pain is feeling out of control and feeling like you don't have any tool to get out of it, and it feels like it runs your life. And this is especially so for people in chronic pain, where every day they are just one step away from a flare-up and they feel freaked out by it all of the time. So not even considering what that does hormonally and what that does psychologically, but if we consider, if I give somebody a tool to get a little more parasympathetic, they have a semblance of control over their pain.
Right.
And that in itself can be a game changer for somebody who is terrified of getting flared up, or who thinks that their level of pain is severely related to some sort of level of tissue damage. That means that there's something really wrong with them. So that level of control that can be accessed by just teaching somebody about how we can calm down from being freaked out is a huge part of rehab.
Do you see kind of like the extreme opposite of things? Like, so athletes that are told to like muscle through it or just kind of deal with it. So then it's like their perception of pain is almost like it's there, but they've been taught to like ignore it. And I'm thinking most recently, like as the NBA playoffs are going on and Joel Embiid hurt his knee and was out for,
right,
from what I understand, not long enough for a true knee sprain to heal. But I mean, you see, he's like killing it in the game right now. And you have to, at least I have to wonder when I'm looking, I'm like, but how bad does that really hurt? And like, what's that going to be like when the playoffs are done? Are you just kind of, because I understand that like an athlete's passion can kind of override that pain experience.
Yeah, and that's where you have to have honest conversations with your patient, where if they do have a competition or they are somebody that's, a high school senior being looked at for schools, and you have that understanding of maybe we push it because you have to. That's like where the rehab conversations get tough, because there's sometimes where my advice for somebody in that type of scenario would be very different from like somebody like me who doesn't compete in anything.
Right.
It would be very different. So yeah, I mean, they're also operating on adrenaline, a lot of money, and like 24-hour care. So their tissue healing times are different than a lot of humans because they're getting like the best of the best care all of the time. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely the conversation too, where a lot of people that I work with are what we kind of call like the urban athlete. Like we all are, we're kind of weekend warriors. We maybe compete in some stuff like masters level events, but we're really active people. And chances are when we get injured, it's not from being sedentary, it's because we overdo it. So how to have that conversation of what is a reasonable amount of volume to continue to push through, and what is, okay, we're getting into territory where we're being unnecessarily inflammatory and irritated. And that's really hard of a conversation to have, and helping somebody understand what is pain, like alarm bell pain, and what is discomfort that you're able to push through. And that's a super hard conversation for a high level athlete who's like, I'm numb to pain. Pain is effort. I got to do this. And it's a little bit of trial and error because like everybody tolerates stuff differently. So that's a very hard conversation to have with people.
I'm wondering,
And a
Like,
delicate balance, right? I mean, because sorry, Cass, but I'll just, and then let you follow right up. A delicate balance because you may have somebody in your hands that, you know, the importance because of the money or the magnitude of the sport, the situation, but simultaneously you're trying to balance that with, you know, not potentially long-term damage. So that it is a challenge, and you can't get inside anybody's head. And the subjective nature of pain is, I would imagine, hard to interpret, you know, at various levels as a doctor of physical therapy. So.
Yeah, giving somebody a visual analog scale of pain, 0 to 10, it's like, you know, I like RPE, it's for you. I don't know.
Right,
So try to do it, but it's hard. And that, to your point of, you know, what do we push through and what do we not? It's why I have on my intake form a question specifically: are you currently training for an event or a competition? When is it? Because I need to know if somebody's coming in to see me, that if they have plans to run the Boston Marathon in 2 weeks and I am testing them and they have ligament sprains and they have a lot of crazy stuff going on, I need to be prepared for, all right, what are we doing here? Like, what is your percentage of how badly you feel you need to do this race? Or how can I get you as close to that as possible? And that's where just being honest as a provider, I think, is super important, because we are expected to have the answer to everything.
Right.
Like, the question I get at the end of every evaluation is like, so how long do you think it's going to take? I'm like, I don't know. We have general basic guidelines of tissue healing and phases of tissue healing, but it's so different for everybody. So I can give you a ballpark estimate, but I don't know. And you have to be okay with being honest with that and say, I might not have a perfect answer for you, but here are all the steps that I'm confident that will get you back to where you want to be. We just have to be a little bit patient to see how it's going to pan out.
Right.
And then I guess my question too is, have you ever had that experience where like a client is like, oh, I didn't realize that this was pain. It was just like something they've just dealt with like chronically for so long that they just kind of assumed that was like normal. And then through doing work with you, all of a sudden they like are like, oh, I didn't know I could feel better. Like it was even possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's amazing the amount of things that our nervous system will habituate to, because if you're used to a baseline level of discomfort, it's like the air conditioning coming on in the background and you don't realize it because you get used to it until it turns off and you're like, what?
Quiet.
Yeah. So it's really similar. And then also on the other end of that, which I think happens even more, is people having that aha moment finally, that the opposite of injured doesn't mean pain-free forever. Meaning the expectation that all of your pain will magically go away one day is just an unrealistic goal as a human being. And trying to have that conversation with people, I think, because like on Instagram, everybody who's trying to sell a rehab program is like, bulletproof your back, pain-free forever. And it's just not realistic. So if we can create a better relationship with pain and understand that it doesn't always mean something is terribly wrong and that it's just a normal part of life, but we can have strategies to make it better, or have a really solid plan for like training around pain. That's a huge thing that I work on with people. Something's bothersome. Okay, we find an entry point for that movement that hurts the most that you can tolerate. We do that. At the same time, we're doing everything else at as high as intensity as we can that doesn't hurt. So we're creating robustness the entire time and not getting deconditioned while we're in pain, because that perpetuates the pain response too. So it's all about really educating people on the absence of pain isn't always the goal. And that can be a hard thing to sell, right? Like that's not really like a sales pitch. Like, oh, you might
not as a physical therapist, you're not going to have people knocking down your door if you keep putting you put that on an outside sign. Hey, we don't cure pain forever.
Not a great sales tactic, but it's realistic and it helps people understand just the reality of it. And I share my pain experiences with my clients too, because I think people think that physical therapists are just walking around and everything always feels good and it's perfect. And I share my pain experiences and what I do to mitigate things too. And I think that's helpful.
Yeah. You know, you said something too, Katie, that really neat about, so you'll work through, I don't know, maybe we have brachial plexus issue. I'm just giving you right shoulder, there's some impingement, whatever, but then you will do everything you can, both to help that. Let's say there is an actual injury there, a soft tissue injury, maybe not extreme, and and this individual probably is alarmed, which is probably exacerbating the pain, right? In their own mind. But do you find that mentally and physically, I know it's a challenging question, but can you say, okay, the person that doesn't do much beyond treating the shoulder, for example, and site specific, and the person willing to work in any other capacity, that there is a rate of healing that might change? I know it would be anecdotal, and maybe you know of research of it, but basically, if I come in once a week and you're just doing some rehabilitative protocols on my shoulder, and somebody next to me has the same injury, they're cycling, they're stretching, they're training lower extremities, do you think we're seeing a better outcome? Obviously, in the person who continues to move, continues to train, both mentally and physically, and are we even potentially expediting recovery in a site-specific place, despite the fact we're training other parts of the body?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that anecdotally and with more evidence. This area of research is becoming more and more studied now, but there is a really interesting recent systematic review, and I published like last October, and it's basically discussing the relationship between those who meet physical activity guidelines and their experience and likelihood of experiencing pain. And there's essentially a stepwise relationship where those who are more physically active and meet physical activity guidelines, the standard 150 minutes a week, 2 days a week of strength training, kind of the bare minimum stuff. Those who meet those guidelines more frequently are less likely to experience musculoskeletal pain.
Wow.
So that's great information for kind of bolstering the idea of, if we can find ways to be active still, that's going to be better for our pain, not even considering all of just the other good things we know to be true about being
Correct, right.
And even if you think of it, go ahead,
the
Cassie.
mental health aspect of it, because think about it, like exactly what you're saying. If you're an athlete or even a recreational, like weekend warrior athlete, and you're injured and you're not doing something that you love and you feel out of control, like being sidelined on the couch is not a fun feeling. So if you're able to maybe not do the intensity that you want to do, but even something as simple as going for a walk, like I just think it has a mental health benefit as well, which out of my wheel, like not my expertise, but I would have to imagine that plays a little bit of a role into it as well.
100%. And we also, if you consider just what a missed opportunity is for somebody. So let's say I'm working with a high school athlete and they have a lower extremity injury. Why am I not working their upper body?
Right.
Why am I not doing things to make them still feel like an athlete? Continue just the ability for them to keep getting stronger and almost use it as, and you can explain it like, this is cool. We have more time to strengthen other stuff that maybe you wouldn't have focused on before. And then also, if you just think of blood flow and all of the amazing things that happen with exercise and getting more blood flow, we know that helps tissue healing. That's the rationale for many modalities and many interventions utilized for tissue healing. That in itself screams like, why not do this? And then also, the message that I'm trying to promote with all of my patients is that of robustness and resiliency. And you can, they're kind of synonyms, but I kind of define them as basically your body's preparedness and your body's exposure to many different types of stimulus, many different types of loads, many different types of demands to prepare you for being a human. And for you, that could be an athlete. For you, it could just be a human who is, what likes to walk their dog and play with their grandkids. So if we just chill out and become even more sedentary because of an injury, we're not building robustness, we're not building resiliency.
And the injury becomes even more global because it's stopping you from doing A. Now it's stopping you from doing B, and then you don't want to go to work. So it becomes completely debilitating, not just, hey, my back hurts, I would imagine,
Yeah. And I think the really horrific, outdated advice of just like resting when you're injured. I always tell people, like, if your car had a problem and you just kept it in your garage, would you expect 2 weeks from now to turn it on and take a road trip? Like, absolutely not. So I wish. So, we can't expect that if we completely rest our body, that's just magically going to make it ready to do what we want it to do again. So that's where it's all about. The biggest thing I work on is, okay, what's the entry point? How can we move in a tolerable way in the injured area that doesn't increase your symptoms or This is where that visual analog scale is used. It's hard, but a really quick and dirty rule, 0 to 3 out of 10 that I use with my patients is like safe zone for discomfort. We're working, we're making adaptation, it's okay. When we get above 3, 4, 5, maybe we're in an area that we need to take a step back or at least just monitor a little bit more. When we're getting above like a 6 into the 7, 8, 9, 10, that's pain, and we don't really want to do that. So if I can help people live in that 0 to 3 world and still move, we are helping to encourage a positive experience with movement with the injured tissue, and now our brain isn't so terrified to move
That's
it.
awesome.
We don't get stuck in that negative feedback loop of being terrified of moving and perpetuating the pain response.
Really, it's fascinating because again, it isn't just it's not just protocol, it's not, rehabilitation science, it's coaching, and it's mental skills training to a large extent. And you're doing a lot of it. That was my point. It's fascinating. You are reframing what the pain is, why it is, what we can do with it, and how inevitably, to your point, you'll probably mitigate it or lessen it significantly. And that's what I love about your approach, because you've explained this to me, and maybe it's more popular than I know. I'm not in the rehabilitative or sciences, but nevertheless, I've not heard it often, and in the context in which you phrase it, which is fantastic, because I think you've calmed. I'm in so much pain at it all the time. If you stabbed me, I wouldn't know you just stabbed me because too many other things going on, But to your point, though, reframing that, which is in one conversation I had with you about a year ago, has helped me significantly. It even works with fatigue, Katie. There are times where I've been extremely tired and something I've done 100 times over, usually some fight form training. And all I got to do is relax the brain and just, all right, we're good. We've been here before. Okay. There's no reason. Your deltoids are burning, your arms are heavy, but you know what? We've been here 100 times. You're not going to die. And all of a sudden, I'm not saying you can go with another 25 minutes of human performance because you said that, but I'll tell you what, it'll certainly decrease the amount of fatigue perception at that moment. And you're doing this with pain in a host of different ways. It's really cool.
Well,
It sounds like
that it stuck with you when you're doing all of the crazy things that you do. And if you're in that much pain, come to Old Bull, because
I am going to come to Old Bull.
Being stabbed not being a problem is something you should check out.
By the way, I have
I
been
would say
actually.
it's up there on the 9-10 scale of like pain.
Correct. Yeah, that's
Well,
our
it
new
depends.
BAS. It's Tony saying he could be stabbed, and yeah, that's our new.
Well, I actually, I shouldn't, when I was young, I grew up a fisherman, and we got in a lot of barroom fights, so I have been stabbed. So, and the only reason why it wasn't all that bad at that time, it was a lot of Jack Daniels in me, so I didn't feel too much of it.
That'll do it.
Like,
That'll
what's
do it.
that? That's saying like you have a headache, so you hit yourself in the toe with a hammer or something.
Right, exactly.
But it also sounds like too, like when you were talking about, and it reminds me of something I've heard in the running community, is like there's a difference between discomfort and pain. So like it sounds like the 0 to 3, and I think that is a realistic expectation that maybe some people is hard to grasp, is that you can be pain-free but still have like a level of discomfort, that discomfort's not always injury. Sometimes it's just like what Tony was saying, at least from my own experience with running, it's like, sometimes like I go through phases of running where I'm like, this is terrible. I'm like, why am I doing this? I hate this. And then like, I'm like, wait, take a deep breath. It's fine. You enjoy this. And then like my whole experience changes. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, this doesn't hurt that bad. Like,
yeah, it's huge. And I totally agree with you. I feel the same way about running. It's like, sometimes I'm doing this, I'm like, this is terrible. Like my entire body hurts. Then it's fine again. But yeah, I think like the big takeaway is, what I'd love our profession of physical therapy to be better at is just helping people understand their own bodies. And we're all nerds and we think this stuff is fascinating, but not everybody does. And not everybody gets like fired up about neuroscience and anatomy. Like we might, but I think that if we can help people in our fields, and especially in a client-facing field, to learn a little bit more about their body and understand that it's pretty cool what you can get your body to do. And it's
Yeah.
pretty cool to learn what your body is telling you. And that's a huge goal for sure. For us at Old Bull, is to help people just have a better like relationship with their own body and better understand it. So you can use tools to help it instead of feeling like you're out of control, like we talked about earlier.
Right.
It sounds like that your approach is a little bit more updated than maybe like the traditional PT model. Like, can you expand on that like a little bit more? Or maybe like what differentiates you and kind of like why you chose to go that route?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's getting better and it's coming around. And I'm sure you feel the same way in the nutrition world. There's probably a lot of like old school advice where they're still doing like the really, really old food pyramid. And you're like, why is this information still out there? And if you let it take over you, it can be very depressing. But I think one of the biggest differences between what we do at Old Bull and other hybrid clinics like ours versus kind of the more traditional model is we are person focused instead of diagnosis focused. So I don't really care about a diagnosis unless it's something that has specific contraindications for what I can and can't do with somebody. Unless there are red flags present in every single evaluation, we're screening for those red flags, meaning infection, tumor, some sort of serious nerve issue, some sort of trauma, cancer, like red flags type situation. Without those things being a part of the pie, we're really not, it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is, because what matters is how the person is presenting in front of you. So it doesn't matter if somebody has a grade 2 lateral gastroc strain and having to tell them that. It could also just be, okay, we have to get your calf stronger. Like, it doesn't have to be so overly medicalized and
Right.
overly and like sterile with what we're telling people. When you're so diagnosis driven, you're looking at a body part instead of a human. So instead of caring as much about giving somebody a super specific diagnosis, I care more about, all right, here's what we found today, and here are all of the areas of opportunity that we can work on to make this less likely to happen in the future, to make you feel better for this upcoming event, to create a more robust human so you can do what you want to do. That's a huge difference between how we practice and how I still think a lot of the traditional model is. And I will go by saying, you know, like we're a cash-based practice. We don't work with insurance companies. And I designed it that way on purpose because I don't want an insurance company dictating how I provide care. But what that means is we do have the liberty of not needing a diagnosis code for reimbursement from insurance companies. So I understand why people still have to do it. But I do think that even if you are in an insurance setting, you can explain to your patients a little bit more about maybe the symptoms and the results of your testing rather than a specific diagnosis.
That line, this was really outstanding explanation. And the line that caught me in that, Katie, was, I think you referred to it as when you're over specific, if you will, or over focused on diagnosis, you're treating the body part and not the human. That is really neat. Dr. Antonio, when you put this together, let's use that. That line has to be, okay, right there. That is really, that's fascinating because you're seeing the global complexities associated with pain, the cause of it, and the perception of it, and how you're going to alleviate it. Just one quick thing, and then we're going to focus a little bit more on, more of what you're doing. I had a question too that I found fascinating because you've proposed so many factors that contribute to pain. And then you even said genetics, right? So I think we understand how genetics would be associated with, in our industry, fiber type, power athlete, endurance athlete, height, segment length, strength versus velocity of contraction, like all those things, right? Genetics, somebody 6'8", basketball versus whatever it is. And we understand that. And I think the genetic differences are very clear when it comes to human performance and probably across the board. Some people are musically inclined, but you're seeing too that there are genetic factors that may even influence, maybe is it the magnitude of pain, the perception of pain, or do some people actually have a different response to a given injury, maybe as compared to someone else? Is that part of the genetic aspect of this?
I'm not
That's
as well versed.
Well, I was
Sorry.
gonna say like the high-low pain tolerance, like it like genetically predisposed.
Yeah. So I'm not as well versed in a lot of the genetic side of pain response necessarily. Also because pain is subjective, so that's so hard to measure. You can objectively measure height and know that perhaps that's genetically linked to something. But I think it would be silly for us to not think that there's some sort of predisposition for a heightened experience of pain, or think about the other things that contribute to pain: anxiety, depression, other mental health conditions that could predispose somebody to having a heightened pain experience. So even if it's not as black and white as this person has the genotype for more pain experience, this person has less, it could be that this person has less coping mechanisms because of some sort of underlying mental health condition or some sort of propensity for it. So perhaps it could also be there are genetic differences in our ability to tolerate, carbon dioxide buildup, and how well we're able to tolerate some sort of, really high stress, high intensity exercise. And that can also be linked to our pain experience with that. So there's a lot of, this is where it gets, the web just keeps getting more complex.
Right. Exciting though.
Yeah, I get fired up about it. So
yeah, because even though we're proposing what could be, the situation. I can just say I did a lot of work, not in research, but certainly in teaching in the origins of atherogenesis, how that happens, the inflammatory process, the macrophage infiltration, why, so my point to this is though, that most people that have, not most, forgive me, but nearly 49% out of the 100% of the people that have cardiovascular disease or MI don't have hypercholesterolemia or hyperlipidemia. However, the inflammatory response, for example, to denatured cholesterol and lipoproteins might be exaggerated. So, under those circumstances, what we're seeing is that inflammation would vary from person to person, which might have an impact, I would assume, on pain response too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where the whole conversation of epigenetics come into play, where think of everything that we just talked about. From the vast majority of people still think that deadlifting is bad for you, and that any pain in your back means you're going to die, and that if your spine rounds, you're gonna, your discs are gonna blow out of your back. So imagine all of that information constantly being circulated.
Right. After you've done them too.
If you have a predisposition to having a heightened pain experience, or if any of the relationships and the factors that we just talked about with maybe mental health, or maybe you're less tolerant to CO2 buildup, whatever. Now that you have this environmental constant inundation with how bad every type of weightlifting is for you, and your discs are like jelly donuts and they're going to explode, you could also probably express that even more genetically.
Exactly.
So it's a mess. And then all you have to do is see one stupid Instagram reel where there's somebody who's showing you a disc just exploding, and now you're terrified.
Now your back hurts.
Yeah, exactly.
Like my mom, don't crack your knuckles, you're gonna get arthritis, or like all those fun like wives' tales that we hear when we're younger.
Yeah, exactly.
I love cracking knuckles. Oh well.
I think it feels good.
It feels amazing, actually.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
So maybe too, just a little bit for everyone, and the Instagram page that people can look, is that Old Bull Athletics? I mean, I know it's under your name, but what's the page name? Old
Bull Athletics. And then our second location that we just opened this past year is Old Bull Athletics with a period, and then Pinecrest. So we have two.
Okay, great, because it's really neat to follow. What's that?
I know. Hey, yeah, we would love to expand to Broward. Absolutely.
Oh, totally. I'll invest to do anything. Yeah, but you have to come.
Yeah, we need you up here. But I think anyone can take a look at your page though, and just look in terms of like, as someone that doesn't know as that much about PT, like I look at your facility and you can just tell that it's different. You can tell that like you guys, I think of, like my old school thought of PT is like, like someone in a wheelchair and like, with like the wheelie stuff and, lots of fun stuff.
Is quite different. We have, a kettlebell up to over 200 pounds. We have squat racks everywhere. We have turf, we have sleds, we have trap bars, we have safety bars, all of that. And we are really, you don't really see us on a treatment table. The cool thing is too, though, that I think a lot of people, if you just look at what Old Bull looks like, or if you walked in, you would assume that it's a place for like really high level athletes or professional athletes. Our patient population is normal human beings of all ages. And our whole mission is to basically make every single person feel like an athlete and show them that they are all deserving of that type of high level care, and that they all will be taught how to load and how to adapt and how to make change and do things that they never thought they could do before. Because that's what rehab should be. If you aren't pushed to the level and beyond of what your life demand is when you leave the door of your rehab facility, if you don't ever get there in your session, you're not doing rehab right. So if I have a CrossFitter who comes in, like a weekend warrior, a mom in her 40s who likes to do CrossFit, she hurts her shoulder and she comes in and I do a bunch of passive care and she gets that temporary little buzz in her nervous system that she feels better because of non-specific effects of manual therapy. She's going to go out and go back to CrossFit and stuff's still going to hurt. So instead, if we go through progressive overload, just like you would with a strength training client, and test them and all of the crazy stuff that CrossFit makes you do. All my CrossFit athletes, I write them a wad from hell before they have to leave me, because if they can't tolerate that with me, they can't tolerate going back to the box.
Wow,
So
okay.
I'm doing AMRAPs and EMOMs and all of this horrific stuff. And it's so much fun for me to write. It's a lot less fun for them to do. But if you're not being pushed to that level, how do you know you're ready to go back?
Right.
And we could say this the same for any type of athlete, any type of person who walks in the door. So that's our mission. We want to make everyone feel like an athlete, and we want to prepare people beyond the level of what they ever thought they could be prepared for.
That is evident, even though I know you all are not, you know, those who post 5 times a day, right? Like many do, where I never understood that. They'll do an ab shot at 10 a.m. and then a progress picture at 6 p.m. Now, I know some people are good at getting better quick, but nobody's that good. But from your page, nevertheless, that's evident that your philosophy becomes evident. And what I really love too is, you know, you're occasionally demonstrating the level to which you push your own body. So, and you're showing that. And I think what's great about that is, you know, it puts less limitations on what everyone can do, right? And here's a therapist, a brilliant one at that, not only a doctor of physical therapy, but somebody who understands the brain quite well. And if she can go to this extent, then we can take the body a lot further than probably most people think. And I say to my students all the time that the adaptive capacity of the human body is so great when you look at the cardiorespiratory system, skeletal muscle, bone, nerve. There's not really any part of the body that isn't adapting to physical activity. But what I think that tells us is not only, it's not, maybe it isn't even good for you. It's absolutely required. Okay, because our adaptive mechanisms are so great that it means this is what we're supposed to do. And I love the way you guys approach that there.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad it comes across too, because I think it's intimidating to see squat rigs and rap music playing when you walk in, but you walk in and you see people. My oldest patient right now is 78 and he plays golf 3 times a week, plays tennis 3 times a week. And we just ran for the first time in 20 years on Tuesday. So like,
really?
It's amazing.
Isn't that cool?
So amazing. And my favorite thing in the world is for somebody who comes in and says, like, I didn't think I belonged in a place like this. And that's a whole other conversation of like the barriers to entry we create for exercise by making people think that it's dangerous, when we really have an inactivity crisis, and like barely 20% of Americans meet physical activity guidelines. Again, those super bare bones, 150 minutes per week of aerobic activity and twice a week of strength training. We have such low adherence to physical activity guidelines, yet we're out there saying that if you do anything with a rounded back, you're going to injure yourself. The barriers to entry to exercise are so great that like we just need to create a positive experience with movement, get people to find a mode that they like, empower them, and make them find that in a way that perhaps there's the community aspect where they have their friends in the gym with them. Perhaps they fall in love later in life with lifting because they never thought they could do it. That's what it's all about. That's the most fun part of the job.
just to further inspire everyone, Katie, just reiterate, because I had once trained an individual who was 72 years old, he was very active in his life. Good man, George. I was a young boy. I was like 20, not boy, but 22 years old. And I always think of him. And at 72, I mean, he was active, hardworking guy, tough guy. But nevertheless, we were talking a loss of 2-3 inches on his waist, and literally seeing quadricep separation. This was never even our goal. Bicep growth, and we know now that you can put an 82-year-old on a treadmill, and we'll see, neurogenesis occurring in the brain just from that physical activity. But you have quite a few patients then that you're able to extend levels of participation then in the things they love over at Old Bull, because of whether it be rehabilitative or preventative, or even, I'm sure you move a lot of people from injury, baseline to performance enhancement as noted. But I think the limitations we put on ourselves, we certainly have because of exercise, but gosh, I think we really put way too many due to the aging process, because there are some people doing some really phenomenal things at really older ages now.
Yeah, I have a friend that didn't exercise his entire life, and in his 50s decided that he was going to start running for the first time, and now he's in his 60s running ultra marathons.
There you go. Wow.
It's nuts.
Think of the amount of people who come in and say oh, my knees hurt, but I'm over 40. The social acceptance that
Right.
Just aging and pain and becoming a blob are inevitable is so deeply ingrained in us that even the people, when I turned 30, people are like, oh, watch out. I'm like, what do you mean? The fact that that's the response, the common response shows the relationship that most human beings have with what they think happens when we age.
Right.
And I think it's really important there's also a lot of great work being done in this area now too, of more about the minimum effective dose of training that's required to maintain muscle mass later in life. It's fascinating stuff. It's a lot less than we ever thought.
Exactly.
And it's such an area of missed opportunity for people, because they think that aging is just, no matter what, you're going to have pain and everything's going to suck now. But if we can show people it doesn't take much, but you can totally build muscle, especially women who really are taught that, okay, well, you're going through menopause now, you're screwed. There's so many opportunities to be able to really help people see no, you still got it. We can do all of this. You can keep aging. You can age along with getting stronger. You can age along with having body composition goals. You can age along with competing in something if you want to. I think the conversation I have with a lot of patients, especially now being in my 30s, I get more fired up about the excitement I have over how awesome I can continue to feel with every decade of life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it as excited as maybe when I was 20 and I was like, let's see how much I can squat. Now it's let's see how long I can keep squatting. This is awesome. I can't wait to feel amazing in my 40s. I can't wait to feel amazing in my 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and to encourage other people to think that way too. It all comes back to creating a positive experience with movement and exercise.
Another thing too that I thought was really cool, because I follow your page, is that the range of physical activities that you help with, like what you were saying, find movement that someone's passionate about. Not everyone's going to enjoy running. Not everyone's going to enjoy golf or tennis. I saw on the page, I think you get a ballerina on there. You had somebody that was doing cheerleading. I mean, it was really cool to see. Did that surprise you? Did you know that going into it, or?
So one of the best parts of Old Bull is that we keep hiring people who are better and better at all the things that maybe the next person didn't have expertise in. So I just keep trying to find people who are better and better and have their own areas of expertise and provide them with a space to see the exact type of patient that they've always wanted to see.
Very cool.
So I have a gymnastics specialist, I have a ballet and dance specialist, we have MMA specialists, we have powerlifting, Olympic lifting, CrossFit specialists, we have people who specialize in field sports, people who specialize in running. The Old Bull for providers, my biggest goal, because obviously with every clinic, our goal is the patient, but also Old Bull's goal is to be a space for a provider who can see the type of patient they want to see, and that gets them fired up. So we get to see people who just perform in these amazing different types of sports. We work with Olympic sailors. We work with people who are going off and competing really high level Division I football. We work with tennis prodigies, we work with ballet dancers. It's amazing. And it's just all about trying to create a space where everybody, no matter what their sport is being taught the importance of being strong and resilient. And we're exposing people of all ages with those sports to that type of treatment. And it's grown even more than I expected it to, with like the dance side of things and things that I just do not have any expertise in whatsoever. So that's why we find people who that's their passion, and they get to see the patients that they really want to see.
It's fantastic, and your vision is so clear, Katie, and I think that's why there's been so much success, and it even translated right into this show and this episode. I mean, you make movement exciting, and you make people want to do it and believe in it and believe in its value. And, you know, to everyone who's not moving, I mean, I think anybody who would listen to us is, but remember, you got two options later in life: the physical therapist and orthopedist, or the cardiologist. I think it's always better to go PT.
Oh, I like that.
So get moving a little bit, but just again, so as we close out, because we want to be certainly concerned about everyone's time here, reiterate the Old Bull page, how people can find you, how do they join up for this or for the services and everything such as that.
Yeah, so our Instagram page, the main page that's easiest to find everything, is Old Bull Athletics. And then mine is KT, like the letters, and then Dabrowski. You'll find me on the page too. If anyone has any questions, we also do virtual evaluations for anybody who's not in the area.
That's good to know.
Yeah. And we also have a fantastic network of providers who are like-minded throughout the country, really. So a lot of times I'm able to direct people to a provider that is maybe in their hometown or in an area that's more accessible to them. So we're here to just basically, we want to change healthcare. We want to change healthcare for the patient and the provider. And we want to just make people realize how important movement is. So any way we can help with that, that's what we're here for.
I'll end it on this, and then Cass, any note you have, and maybe reiterate ISSN. I was a KD fan before this. I'm a bigger fan afterward. You are good at what you do, and I've been around a long time, and I just know it. And I think you're doing amazing work, changing the paradigms within the industry, but one life at a time. It's really neat to see what you're doing for people. Keep it up. It's fantastic, and I'm really happy we had the opportunity to discuss this because it's a great subject.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was a lot of fun.
Yep. Cass, anything? Close it out.
Don't forget, June 15th through 17th or 18th, we're having the 20th annual ISSN conference here in Fort Lauderdale. Katie will be there. So if you
Katie will be there, everybody.
want to ask her in person, just come join us for a really great time in the sun and some awesome research.
All right, Sports Science Dude, YouTube, Spotify, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Give us a like. See everybody for our next episode next week. Thanks all.